Hi there. We already knew that Daesh is a really disgusting organization. With Daesh, I mean this thing that like to call itself IS, ISIS, ISIL, the Islamic State, or whatever. Let's just call them Daesh. But I'm not going to just talk about them being bad. We knew that already, and if anyone didn't know it before, then the last week's atrocities should be well enough to wake people up. As I'm making this video, in the last week they did terrorism attacks in Beirut and Paris, and Kurdish troops that liberate an area from them found a mass grave of middle-aged and elderly women, mostly people who was not capable of fighting in any way. They were simply killed for being too old to be sold as sex slaves. So yeah. Yeah, instead of beating the dead horse that Daesh is evil, if you want to use that word at all, I'm going to talk about three things. First of all, what they are, what they should be categorized as. Second, what they are fighting against. And third, what we need to fight against. Okay, first of all, what Daesh is. It is this thing that people tend to call by names such as fundamentalism, extremism, radicalism, fascism, and so on. Personally, I call it Ditnak. It's a combination of dichotomies, but that is black and white thinking, identitism, that is letting the universe revolve around your identity, termism, that is mistaking words for, well, magical thinking, pretty much, believing that things are a certain way just because you have labeled them a certain way rather than the other way around. And narrativism, getting stuck in your own storytelling. Authoritism, simply letting your claims of authority run on empty and try to prove themselves. And finally, categorism, which is prejudice, bigotry, and discrimination based on the categorization of people. So, Ditnak, this is what I like to call it, but the point is not what we call it, the point is this basic thing, what it is. Ditnak is Ditnak. It can be of varying degrees of severity in itself, and the people who do it can be on different levels of trying to enforce their bullshit beliefs on others. But at the core, Ditnak is Ditnak. We need to compare Daesh with groups like the Ku Klux Klan and the Lord's Army and the Nazis and the North Korean government and so on. It doesn't really matter whether their excuse is religious or ideological, whether it's based on Christianity or Islam or communism or an idea of the Aryan race or whatever. The problem is what people do with their ideas. Moving on to what Daesh are fighting against. Well, first of all, they are total bigots with this in-group versus out-group mentality, where they're pretty much fighting against everybody who is not them. And that can attract a lot of people, but they're also fighting against something else, something we should all be fighting against. And I think this is one of the main reasons why they are attracting followers. You see, the way the world is organized today is really horrible in some ways. We are living in a society which is globalized in many ways, and many of these ways are good. We have global society, global science, global economy, global this and that, also global terrorism and global pandemics and so on. We have global politics, but what we don't have is global implementation of human rights and global democracy. To what extent a person's rights are acknowledged depends on what citizenship they have. This is a system I like to call apartwelt. And most people see that we're living in a problematic system. Various people conceptualize this problem in different ways. They're trying to pinpoint the problem. Personally, I believe that my conceptualization is the most accurate one. Otherwise, I wouldn't use this conceptualization. I'm open for debate on the subject. Like to hear everybody's opinion. But the point is this. Daesh is offering a bad alternative, but still an alternative. They are offering a dream of a world where everybody is equal. Sure, it's equal in their dream under God, in reality, quote, equal, unquote, under their totalitarian regime of forcing pipe dreams down people's throats. But still, it is a dream of a unified world, a world of global society where everybody is part of the society. I think this is a main reason why some people want to join them. Of course, there are other reasons as well. People buying into the religious propaganda and so on. But I'm finally getting the point of one really bad book I had to read as part of the curriculum when I studied the master program in human rights studies. I still think this book was really missing the point it was trying to make, but now I'm getting the point it was trying to make. It was talking about different kinds of globalization, and it tried to categorize it as three kinds of globalization. We had globalization from above, from governments and corporations and so on, and globalization from below, from grassroots movements and so on. And then it suddenly jumped into making this total equivocation where Islam and Al-Qaeda was suddenly the same thing. So Osama bin Laden would thus equal globalization from Islam. And like, this is word salad, anti-Muslimist nonsense. But what I think they were trying to grasp at was that this idea of a global caliphate, it gives people a dream of a politically unified world, a dream of an end to apartheid. And while the implementation is wrong in all the most horrible ways, the idea to end apartwelt is an idea we must cherish, and we need to channel it in better ways. We need to fight against apartwelt, not based on Ditnak, but in opposition to Ditnak. We need to fight against apartwelt and against Ditnak. Together as human beings with human rights and capacity for rational thought. There are no simple solutions. We can't just flip our fingers and make the problem go away. And we can't just tear down the bad old system and dream that something better will come instead. As a side note, I really preferred the comic book version of V for Vendetta over the movie version, where they suddenly pulled a happy ending to that story of destructiveness. No, terrorism does not save the world. Terrorism is a dead end. People who dream of salvation from Daesh or whatever need to think again. There will not be a religion or a political ideology that will save you. Religion and political ideologies are the same basic things. They are worship of abstract concepts. And the world is too complex to be reduced to abstract concepts. Religion and ideology are not in themselves dead ends. We can certainly use politics, all of us. And for those who want to use religion, fine, as long as you do it in a good way. That's no problem at all. The problem is Ditnak, how you relate to your identities and stories and so on, not to having identities and stories and so on in the first place. So, in conclusion, fight against apartwelt and fight against Ditnak. And of course, fight against all those who would stand up for Ditnak or apartwelt or both. And that's all I have to say for now. Live long and prosper.